You're watching the 2023 City of Detroit Political Overview with Khary Frazier of Detroit is Different and Malachi Barrett of Bridge, Detroit. What were some of the highlights you remember most from Detroit City Council public comment in 2023?
So there was a lot of energy and opposition and activism around tax breaks for a number of developments, but more so than anything else, the District Detroit project, that $1.5 million downtown development plan, which is really the latest vision of this kind of long-stalled project by the Illich companies, and now Stephen Ross from U of M has gotten involved. And, they came to the city and asked for some $700 million in tax abatements to help fund their projects, which include, a number of housing, office, retail, and hotels on mostly parking lots, the vacant lots that people obviously have issues with in downtown Detroit. They were supposed to break ground in July, and that hasn't happened. There's this kind of ongoing debate, negotiation with the Wayne County Stadium Authority for two pieces of land right outside Comerica Park. As you're driving down Woodward, turn your head to the right if you're headed north. And there are those two big parking lots where it was really supposed to be the start of this project to create kind of a walkable, neighborhood that connects to U of M's Center for Innovation. We actually it did break ground. I think last week they had a groundbreaking ceremony. A couple blocks west of there, basically.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the culmination of a lot of frustration people have had with the Illich family and their companies, and the promises of turning downtown Detroit into this very inclusive entertainment destination with great local restaurants and housing and hotels. And really, it's been going back decades now. It's like 30 years or something now at this point. And all that really we have had to show for it is the Eddystone, which is, this really nice apartment building that has a couple of affordable housing units, and, the arenas, obviously. So a lot of the debate around this came from the community benefits ordinance, which, basically large development projects that ask for some tax money have to go through this negotiation with the community. And the community puts together a council of residents who try to identify some of the negative impacts of that development, and then secure benefits, secure investments into the community. And so there was a lot of debate over, if we're giving away all of this tax money, as people kind of characterized it, if we're helping to subsidize and fund this with public dollars, what are we getting out of it? Olympia and the related companies and Stephen Ross said, well, you're going to get a lot of jobs. You're going to get some affordable housing. You're going to get, world-class hotels that people are needing that will kind of continue this like downtown investment momentum. And, that will have kind of trickle effects throughout the city. Detroiters will get these jobs. Detroiters will get, a chance to open these restaurants and so on. And I think community was very skeptical of that for a lot of reasons.
And I can definitely speak because, I was in the foray with this a little bit. I had an appearance on Let It Rip with Reparations and Pastor Mo, where we were speaking about this. And a lot of people were like, yeah, you telling them what it is. And also a member of a group that formed after that. And they're definitely a leading voice in public comment and so much else with so many activists. So like Russ Ballant, Teresa Kelly, Mama Amara, Theo Pride, Tanya Myers-Phillips, and so many others joined Detroiters for Tax Justice. And the key analysis of this is it's our tax money that we vote on millages and certain things like that. Just that abatement takes the money off the top to go into certain projects that comes at the sacrifice of those monies not going to the other services and the other things in the city of Detroit. So it is essentially tax money for the city of Detroit to sustain itself being used in the private sector. This was spoke to of like, well, Mayor Coleman Young did this even at one point in time, which it's truth in that merit. There were certain projects, and even at that time, Mayor Coleman Young, as beloved as he was, faced some protest from the people about taking tax money and using it in the private sector on behalf of community benefits. And then when we look at the Illich family, and the Olympia Holdings, it's been a history of their projects not following through on the community benefits, even on the definitely on the employment, uh, what was said to be in employment. And oftentimes it's like, well, too many people use drugs. These people don't want jobs. These people don't have the education. So we'll just pay the fine to the city as opposed to actually hiring the people to do the development and do the building.
And those fines are supposed to go back into the workforce training programs that the cities use. So, the idea is that companies that can't meet that hiring threshold pay the fines. The fines are used to train up more Detroiters so that eventually, and I think this kind of is like the broader kind of criticism of all this, in that case, the money is supposed to go into training up the workforce so that this doesn't become a problem long term. Like there's enough Detroiters to do the work, but has that really started to happen?
And since so many of these projects, and it's new projects looking to come down the pike in 2024, where it's back to you're using so much of this tax-based money, and that's money away from schools, that's money away from the water department, that's money away from public safety and policing, that's money away from parks, that's money away from people sweeping the streets, that's money away from waste disposal and trash. This is money away from city services, sewer systems, all for the districts to exist, that I guess is supposed to spur more economic investment. And as of now, I don't know the relationship for the greater good for all residents of some of the projects that have received some of these influxes of tax monies. And like I say, I am a Detroit is different content creator, amongst other things, and I have some hats that I've worn. But the economic factors, the social factors, the meaning like what does this do for a community, and then when it comes to the business factors, just the property value factors. So it's like your property value kind of goes up because like, wow, you know what I'm saying, we'll be getting the Super Bowl soon, but then it kind of goes down because my sewer system, I got main drain, the main bust every time it's any ice outside. So, and nobody's able to address that for long periods of time. This is, like, how do you make these decisions? And in this same discussion, it was interesting, connected to a lot of this, one of Olympia Entertainment's PR people, Ryan. Uh, I saw her like for the opening of one of the businesses down there, and I'm like, look, I know you may see me as the evil guy or on the opposite side, but some of these points that I'm just bringing from the community, some of these community meetings that are held to talk about these projects and who's the players and the partners in this. It's just make it make sense to a lot of other people in other communities because people are unaware of how much money is going towards these things.
Mm-hmm.
One of my key arguments was this needs to go towards reparations because even though you just let me know, like the general fund can't give money, like sometimes I'm not trying to figure out the legality reasoning behind something, which I know it will be a clip that somebody will take and one day be like, see, this is why this guy's ignorant. I'm not trying to find out the legality behind it because sometimes it comes back down to fairness and what's fair and equitable.
Yeah.
It's inequitable.
Philosophically, you would say, why can tax dollars go here, but you can't give money to somebody over? And that's the exact thing that we actually heard from people. I mean, people said what you're saying right now.
My argument is these are multi-billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to do business, have them dig in their own pocket and pay for it. If this is a good business deal, they should want to invest in it.
Yeah.
And if the city has to step in and assist in this investment, how good is the business deal? Meaning, like, if we got to incentivize a billionaire to want to do business, it may not be that good of a deal. Like, I'm just speaking from a entrepreneur's perspective right now, you know?
Yeah, we heard that a lot. I mean, especially like the office components of it. I mean, I was looking the other day at the Downtown Detroit Partnership has some stats online, and you know, office workers are still at half capacity compared to the pandemic, or there's half as many office workers downtown as there were in 2019 before the pandemic. So, so why are we building more office space? I mean, the argument is, well, the stuff that we have is old and people don't want it. And so if we buy or if we build, you know, high end office, there's a market.
And let's just stop right there.
Supposedly,
like I say, if it's a market for it, and I'm a person that's into doing office buildings, I should be like, oh, it's a market for it. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is.
Yeah.
Like, let's put it like this. I mean, I assume in Dubai, they're not taking Dubai's school money to help trillionaires build a hotel. No, it's like, yo, you want to do business here, you're going to have to put your money up.
There's this idea that like the development climate in Detroit is still really difficult. And
I know this argument, and I've heard that.
Yeah. Going back to, I mean, when people talk about, well, you know, Mayor Young is the guy who started, I mean, it was a very different environment at the time. People, you know, didn't want to invest in downtown the same way. And so this is a question we kind of started to try to peel back to at the time this was all coming through. Like, okay, we've been using these tools now for decades. There's actually even newer, more powerful state brownfield tools that have been created in the last couple of years for like super projects.
Let me explain what a brownfield is my community project that we dealt with. So a brownfield, for people to understand this, is a designation that came about from the federal government, but also states have this designation where a space of land is labeled as so toxic that if you want to do development on it, the government has to help you. Most Detroit property is labeled as brownfield property wherever it is. So this is kind of like the loophole within what a brownfield is. Now, some places, because of plants and God knows what factories was going on, and this is an industrial city historically, that stuff really is like, okay, you go over there, you don't want to start digging, you know what I'm saying? But some places, it's just the fact that like, oh, it was blighted, so it's a brownfield, the designation for it in the process. And Lord knows, I'm sure that is someone working with state governments that's like, that's not how it works. But I'm speaking from my education of what this was and even talking to developers about, okay, so let me know what a brownfield is. Meaning, even if you're downtown Detroit is a brownfield designation, which does also have impacts on property values. This was the argument in my neighborhood when a space was labeled as a brownfield for a warehousing space that my community was dealing with. So now you can pick up, but I just want people to know what a brownfield is.
Yeah, so there's a state tax tool that basically allows part of the cost of environmental cleanup to be covered with tax dollars. So that's the brownfield. But, you know, there's a number of things that go into like why it's difficult to build, you know, these things and why tax dollars need to be, you know, in their argument, need to be supported. Part of it is, you know, just the increase in construction that has come during the pandemic. Part of it is if you're building housing, you know, especially affordable housing, you know, you're not going to get a huge return on your investment. And so part of this
this is where it's like
they want a higher return. So that's why.
And that's where I start having a problem, because this is where it becomes that public-private partnership stuff and not what's straight and what's needed. I'm an entrepreneur. It's like you take risk in business. Like when I started my business school journey, it's like entrepreneur, risk taker. If the city's subsidizing your project, it ain't a risk. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Even me with my business dealings. Like if a person's like, hey, Khary, you know what I'm saying? You want to start another podcast studio? It's like, I ain't got no money for it. But it's like, we'll give you all the money. We'll buy all the equipment. We just want you a part of it. I'm not saying I'm not going to take that project serious, but it's not like what's happening over here. I think for business to be effective, entrepreneurs need to be materially involved. Materially means they have to be putting their money up. That's where you get the focus. Because if other people put the money up, it's like, you like moonlighting, kind of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially if the people that put the money up, they're not even business people. They're cities and municipalities. If I'm Stephen Ross, I own the Miami Dolphins. I live down in Florida. I could care less about whatever. It go good, it go bad. Who knows? It's almost like a vacation house or something.
Yeah.
You know what
Basically,
I'm more concerned with my South Beach stuff than what is this District Detroit? Whatever. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's good to have in my portfolio. Oh, the city's going to give $1.5 billion for the project. Guess what? I guess I am on board.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why people debated this for like 6 months, because there's a lot of different dimensions to it and a lot of frustration about who gets access to like this money that gets leveraged by having the money to put up on the table. It's kind of like a delayed gratification in some ways too, because the developer's argument and like the DEGC and some of these city agencies that help projects like this get across the board say that, if it's not worth it to the investors, if they're not going to make enough money off of it, they're not going to do it. And then that hurts Detroit overall. And the idea is that if we put aside a portion of tax revenue to help them cover some of their costs, in 20, 30 years, the net increase, this is something they talk about a lot, the net increase in tax revenue is, much greater than what we put up up front. So their argument would be that, okay, you lose out on the tax revenue, which is significant. Don't get me wrong.
But let's unpack that a little bit.
But you kind of win in the long term.
If the tax revenue continues to be, hence, like for 40 years, money that's just taken out and used for more projects like this, it really wouldn't make a difference anyway.
Yeah. And, 30 years, that's like, what, a generation or 2 generations of students that don't have access to that. So it's like...
Well, my whole life, Coleman Young era, born in 82, it's been active. And that pot's only gotten larger and larger and larger and larger my whole life. So if they keep taking from that cookie jar, then when do some cookies come in it?
Yeah, that's what people are asking for, is like, okay, when are we going to actually see the result of this? And when does the development environment change? And has it already changed to the point where this is no longer necessary? Because this was supposed to be kind of a thing that would help get downtowns turned around.
Yeah.
And people are kind of looking around now at downtown Detroit and they're saying, I mean, things seem to be going pretty well. Developers want to come build stuff here, so why are we putting up all of this?
Which also in the pulse of let me put on my other hat as the entrepreneur. It's tough. Like, I mean, I'm down there and I'm seeing more people, but I don't know how much is like business turning over, like the dollars turning over. I think really some of the impacts of the and Lord knows, it's like I'm a black man saying this, so I know people will be like, a lot of my Detroiters, different audience, will gasp at this. Since the passing of L. Brooks Patterson, which Oakland County was already experiencing a decline of, at one point in time, being like, I want to say the second richest county in America to where it's at now. Like, and a lot of that monies, I think, came from Detroit, just being so Detroit adjacent. But the impacts of what's happening in the region and the money flowing and the dollars flowing throughout the region are suppressed right now. So it's hard to really give an assessment of where things go with cash flows. We definitely know the impacts of, automation and the big three and where things exist today versus where they existed in the 90s, 80s, 70s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You go further back, but it's other impacts happening with the circulation of cash flow. And I don't necessarily know how fluid cash flow is in Metro Detroit, in the state of Michigan, and furthermore, even America itself, looking at some of the challenges that are tightening wallets for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's important also to acknowledge that, like, regardless of how this stuff gets built, putting the whole tax subsidy question aside, the housing that is being built is not affordable for most people in the city. And even the affordable stuff, when we're talking about, rent rates that are affordable for 80% of the area median income, which is a calculation that's done to kind of quantify what counts as affordable housing.
So wait, let me explain. Let's go back to math class.
Yeah.
You got mean, median, mode. Does people remember them 3 M's? You remember that in math, trigonometry, algebra 2? Probably not. So mean is an average, meaning like, so a mean would be the average after you have, like, if it's 10 numbers, you take all 10, you divide them by the 10, and then you end up with whatever that average is. A median, on the other hand, is like the middle number between what's highest and what's lowest, meaning like it's the middle point. So like kind of, here we go for all my college students. If you were at a class and your teacher graded on the curve, and you could convince that nerd to be like, yo, my G, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I mean, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Let's make an A a C. Then that would be the median. So meaning that like if one apartment is $8,000 in a district and every other apartment is $100 in the district, you're still going to have a $4,000 median. Right now, I was looking at more of the United States real estate values and things, and I was looking at the median rent, monthly rent for the United States is $2,000. So this changes the landscape. This goes back into like what affordable and what isn't affordable as inflation is having dire impacts. And I already know my Democratic people are saying it's not. And I hear what you're saying. And I'm not necessarily saying that the rate of inflation is moving faster than the general cost of living that's pacing.
I think
we can have that.
Census numbers came out this week and showed that the average, so the increase in wages is not keeping up with the increase in rent prices.
For the past, I mean, really for a long time, but definitely right now. Yeah. I mean, we're the national, what is it? The national minimum wage, as crazy as that is. You know, we haven't had a national minimum wage increase in like 18 years or something like that. Yeah. And let alone when we get into like the state minimum wage that just went up just a little bit, on pace, I think, by 2026 to be like $12.75 or something, but just incremental. But then when you think about how fast rents are moving up as landlords are making up for what they experienced through COVID too, a lot of those COVID and eviction protections that existed. Yeah, a lot of stuff has changed in reference to renting and the information you got to give. And this is more of the national story, but it impacts the local story because things are changing. So what's labeled as affordable, which I think affordable in the city of Detroit probably should be rent. I think you should be able to get a 1-bedroom space for about $750. This is Khary Frazier gut people I know a month. And if you want like a 2-bedroom space, like something like a little bit more spacious for like family, I think you should be looking at maybe about $950. That is not what's happening in the city of Detroit.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, so to bring it back to the council table, I mean, this is a conversation that came up a lot. What does affordable housing mean? Yeah. Is it actually affordable for people? You should be spending a little under a third of your income on housing costs. That's like what affordable that means for the federal government anyway.
Yeah, that is the old school. Here goes another national thing. Like that's old school, like how they would look at things.
Right.
You know, definitely kind of like here's another economic term for people to know, the gross domestic product. Gross domestic product means that the government will assess usually like 20 products or so that are the most sold products that they think are common that most people have, and they'll follow the trends maybe for about a quarter, and then it'll say like, is it up, is it down, where are things saying, what's sustaining, you know. Now, this is where I personally, as a person that nerds out on economist stuff sometimes, I don't like it because they pick and choose what goes in and what goes out. Unless you stay with those same products for at least like maybe 4-year increments, it's harder to trust. But, you know, but with that, that's in that same arc of, 1/3 of your money should go into mortgage or rent.
Yeah. And what we're finding is the actual rental costs that, you know, for projects that have sought tax breaks to get approved by city council, in a lot of cases are not really affordable for the average Detroit residents.
Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about affordable for Detroiters. And then when we look at Detroiters, then comes some of those other socioeconomic, political factors of, well, you know, these people aren't educated at the same level. And it's like, well, you need to go into, hence, like I say, if I materially am investing in this business, I'm going to design the business to make the profit for it to operate. But if I got other people's money, I can kind of operate in a different way, which brings us to.
I just want to say real quick too, another part of this conversation that came up when it comes to affordable housing is what are the size of the units that were getting built.
Yeah.
Council has actually, and Council President Sheffield has said specifically that they want to look at some ways to kind of basically push developers to make affordable units that aren't like just studios and one bedrooms, because they want affordable housing for families.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that gets built, the mix tends to be more toward on the side of like smaller rooms. I mean, there were some that got approved this year that were like 375 square feet, which is like not much bigger than the room that we're in, or like an apartment, or a hotel room, basically, and like the need really is for families.
Yeah.
And there's not new housing that's being built, not new homes, not new single family homes. So if the apartments are being built, I mean, there's not enough like 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. And that was something that came up a lot.